I found a crypto whale hiding in the last place that you would ever think to look. Not in some secret wallet or offshore fund. No, this whale was sitting right on the stock market, hiding in plain sight. Just like that, my curiosity was off the charts. 100 million tokens quietly stashed away, a treasure chest that nobody was even talking about, and I had to find out who did it and why. Alright, so let me set the scene. I'm a guy who spends far too much time sniffing out oddball crypto clues. Comes with the kind of crypto analyst territory, I guess. So, when a rumor floated into my inbox about a mysterious stash of Sui tokens, I perked up. Now, Sui isn't exactly Bitcoin or Ethereum. It's one of those newer blockchains with big dreams and a funny name. So why would someone accumulate that much of it? Well, the tip was pretty vague, but it said something about a public company holding a boatload of Sui. A public company. Holding crypto like it's gold in Fort Knox. Well, you can consider me intrigued. Now, I remember sitting there with my coffee, half kind of distracted, when I saw it. A tiny line in an earnings report mentioned digital assets on the balance sheet. Usually that's code for Bitcoin or Ethereum, right? But then I saw the letters SUI. I nearly spit out my drink, right? Was a mainstream NASDAQ listed company secretly hoarding Sui tokens. Now this sounded like either a mistake or the beginning of a wild goose chase. And well, by now you should know me. I had to chase it down. I started digging through public filings, press releases, and even snooped around on LinkedIn to see if any execs at this company were actually talking about Sui. And sure enough, I hit pay dirt in a press release dated just a few days ago. Sui Group Holdings, yes, that's the actual name. As in the name itself, after the token wasn't a clue enough about what they're actually up to. So it turns out that Sui Group Holdings had just made a pretty big splash. They announced that they would be scooping up another 20 million Sui tokens. 20 million. Just like that. Now that haul kind of bumped their total stash to about 101.8 million Sui tokens. So I did some quick math. Okay, fine. I used a calculator. Still, I'm on my first coffee, right? Give me a break. At the current prices, that is roughly $344 million worth of tokens. So let that sink in. A public company in Minnesota, of all places, holds a crypto treasure chest worth over $250 million. Now, at first, I kind of scratched my head. How does a relatively low-profile company accumulate that much crypto without everyone noticing? This is where things got interesting and a little bit detective-like. Now, at least in detective stories, where the sleuth kind of finds a hidden door behind a bookshelf, right? Well, I found the corporate equivalent, a footnote about a unique arrangement with the Sui Foundation. Bingo. Now, apparently, Sui Group isn't just buying tokens on regular exchanges like you or I might on Coinbase or BitGet. No. They have an exclusive deal with the Sui Foundation itself to purchase discounted, locked Sui tokens straight from the source. So imagine having a direct line to the mint, right, where you get freshly locked tokens at a price that you would never see on the open market. Now, it's kind of like being friends with a chef at a bakery. You get the first pick of the warm bread at a discount before it even hits the shelves. Well, that is Sui Group's secret sauce. Now, when I read that, my jaw literally hit the floor, right? A special pipeline for cheap Sui. Now that's a game changer, isn't it? It means that Sui Group can accumulate a ton more tokens for the same budget than if they were, buying like the rest of us plebs. Now, no wonder that their holdings ballooned so fast, right? They essentially have an early investor advantage, but as a publicly traded company. So I was half expecting to find some kind of catch here, like maybe those tokens are locked for a long time, or some kind of weird strings are attached to it. But even if they are locked for a while, Sui Group doesn't seem to mind. They're clearly playing the long game here, building what I can only describe as a Sui fortress. Now, naturally, I had questions. Are they just hoarding these tokens under the mattress, or is there actually a plan? And it turns out there is a very much, at least there is much a plan, a very big plan in fact. See, holding 101.8 million Sui is pretty cool, isn't it? And all of that, right? But Sui Group is doing something smart while they're actually holding it. They're staking most of the entire stash on the Sui network. Staking, for the uninitiated, is basically like earning interest by locking your tokens into the network to help secure it. And Sui's staking rewards are around 2.2% a year right now. So 2.2% of 101.8 million tokens, well, that comes out at roughly $20,000 worth of Sui every single day in rewards. And yes, you heard that right, about 20 grand a day just for holding and staking. So that's like earning a nice car's worth of money every single day, paid in Sui tokens. That's not too shabby for a side income. Now, this blew my mind even further. They're not just betting on Sui by holding the tokens, they're leveraging the position to get even more tokens over time. It's double down strategy. They use a special deal to get cheap Sui, then stake the Sui to accumulate even more Sui. Right? I have to kind of tip my hat to that, right? Whoever is strategizing this at Sui Group is playing 4D chess while the rest of us are playing checkers. So by this point, I was basically pacing around my room. I'm excited and maybe a little concerned that I've stumbled onto some kind of well-kept secret. Now, I jumped into our free educational Discord server to share what I found and gauge if it was, at least if I was, overreacting to it. The community's reaction was pretty much, wait, is this for real? A publicly traded company doing a crypto whale strategy? Well, we had a bit of a field day discussing it. It's not every day that you hear about Wall Street types quietly becoming altcoin whales. And speaking of Wall Street, Sui Group did something clever with their shareholders too. Right, they came up with this metric called Sui per share. So if you own a share of Sui Group, that's the stock, how much Sui, the token, do you indirectly own? Now, as of now, that metric is 1.14, meaning that for every share of stock is actually backed by 1.14 Sui tokens in their treasury. Now, a few weeks ago, before the latest token purchase, it was only around 0.92 Sui per share. So in a short time, each share's claim on Sui actually increased by almost a quarter of a token. That's pretty tangible, right? Boost, or a tangible boost to your underlying value. So if you ask me, it's like your stock certificate just got an upgrade, now entitling you to a little more crypto goodness than before. Now, of course, the company is crowing about, how this move enhances shareholder value. And honestly, it kind of does, doesn't it? If you believe in Sui's long-term value anyway. So if Sui takes off someday, shareholders basically get a golden ticket via their tokens, or those tokens that the company is actually holding. It's as if the company turned itself into a Sui holding vehicle, like a crypto ETF, but with one specific token and an aggressive accumulation strategy. Now, I know what you might be thinking. This all sounds great, but what is the catch? Well, are these guys just gambling with shareholder money on the hunch? And that's a fair thought too, isn't it? Sui is not a household name like Bitcoin. It's a newer blockchain that not everyone is convinced about just yet. So is Sui Group crazy? Or do they know something that we don't? Now, before I try and answer that, let me drop one thing here, right? This might just shock you, but I'm not a financial advisor and nothing in this video is financial advice. Cryptocurrencies are highly volatile and you could lose all of the money that you invest. You should always do your own research and consult a qualified professional. After all, your investments are entirely your responsibility, and you should know that nothing is ever guaranteed when it comes to investing. Neither I, this channel, nor YouTube are liable for any losses, and this video today is for entertainment and educational purposes only. So I had to get that out of the way because trust me, I'm as excited about this story as you are, but I'm definitely not telling anyone to run out and mimic this move. This is just one intriguing case study in the crypto world. So alright, the disclaimer is done. Now, do they know something that we don't? Well, let's talk about what's happening with Sui's network itself, because maybe that holds some clues. So I did some more digging around, and guess what? Sui's on-chain activity has been picking up in a big way. In the last week of August, the network's recorded something like 47.9 million transactions in just 1 week. That's the highest weekly transaction count since April. So in other words, people are actually using this thing. For a relatively new blockchain, that kind of activity is pretty much a green flag. But it's not just random transactions. Sui has been getting some real action in the DeFi department too. Specifically, there's a project called Threshold Network that brought something called tBTC onto Sui. Now, tBTC is basically Bitcoin that has been tokenized to at least be used in DeFi applications. It's kind of like putting Bitcoin into an Iron Man suit so that it can play on other blockchains, right? Phase 1 of this integration was so successful that Bitcoin-based assets apparently made up about 20% of Sui's total value locked in DeFi. Sui suddenly became a mini hub for Bitcoin flavored DeFi, with around $10 million worth of Bitcoin deposits and a couple of million in liquidity flooding in. Now that's a pretty big deal because it shows that Sui is expanding its ecosystem and attracting capital, even from Bitcoin holders, which is a tough crowd to impress. Now, they're rolling out phase 2 of the kind of whole tBTC integration, right, which should bring even more Bitcoin liquidity onto Sui. Connect the dots then. A growing network usage, a company that's betting big on network by hoarding tokens, it kind of starts to paint a picture, doesn't it, right? Sui Group's chief investment officer even said outright that this move reflects their belief in Sui's long-term potential. So they're not being shy about their conviction. And they're not alone. I found that even Grayscale, the big crypto investment firm, has been eyeing Sui. Now, Grayscale did some research highlighting Sui's potential to deliver the next killer dApp. Now, that kind of dApp that's so popular that it brings millions of new users onto the crypto, or at least into crypto, right? Think like CryptoKitties for Ethereum back in the day, or Grayscale basically hinted that Sui's tech could be fertile ground for some breakout application. Now, if that happens, early Sui investors, like our friends at Sui Group, stand to gain an awful lot. So let's also consider the broader trend. Public companies dabbling in crypto treasuries isn't unheard of. MicroStrategy famously turned, practically all of its cash into Bitcoin and made Michael Saylor either an absolute genius or a madman, depending on whom you ask. Right? We've seen other firms accumulate things like Solana and Toncoin to get exposure to those ecosystems. It's almost becoming a bit of a playbook, like a promising blockchain, buy a ton of its tokens, and then let shock market investors get indirect kind of exposure through your company, right? Sui Group is just the newest and maybe one of the boldest to do it with the newer network like Sui. Now, let's let's kind of talk about this. How is the market reacting to all of this news? Well, when Sui Group announced their latest token binge, the price of Sui itself, or the token itself, actually got a nice little bump. It was up about 4 or 5% on that day, from roughly $3.29 to around $3.40. Nothing earth-shattering yet. It's not like Sui went on a moon landing overnight, but investors did notice. In fact, Sui's price had been struggling just a little bit beforehand, so it's kind of well below its all-time high of $5.35 from back in January, and earlier in the week it was flirting with the uncomfortable area of just above $3. So seeing it bounce to $3.40 was a bit of a breath of fresh air. Now, here is where the technical analysts, people kind of chime on in. Some analysts kind of pointed out that Sui's price chart has been forming a classic falling wedge pattern. Now, if you don't speak chartese, right, that pattern is basically a price that has been kind of dropping for a while, but in a range of movements that gets tighter and tighter. So think of a cone-shaped pointing downwards, right? It often kind of signals that the downtrend is running out of steam and the reversal might be coming soon. Often, when a price breaks out of a falling wedge to the upside, you kind of get a pretty decent rally, at least according to these analysts, right? If Sui can push decisively above $3.50 or even $3.52, then it could actually be the spark for a much bigger move. And they're talking potentially a run back towards previous highs and maybe even beyond. In fact, one particularly bullish analyst, at least I came across, has a target of $10 if certain conditions line up. $10. I nearly fell out of my chair when I read that. That would be almost triple the current price. Now, I would take such a bold prediction with a grain of salt, of course, and a whole spoonful of caution, because crypto is volatile and unpredictable, but it shows the kind of optimism floating around in some corners. So, to recap this wild journey, I went looking for a whale and found a publicly traded company that essentially just turned itself into a Sui whale. The surprise? Instead of some shadowy kind of crypto figure or anonymous fund, it was a legit company with the SEC filing and a NASDAQ ticker, right? That, they have a sweetheart deal, to get tokens on the cheap, right? And they're maximizing that by staking and compounding their holdings. They truly believe that Sui is going places, enough to bet their treasury on it. Meanwhile, Sui's network is actually coming alive. More users, more DeFi, even Bitcoin integrations, and some big names like Grayscale paying attention. The token's price has been in a bit of a lull, but showing signs that it could wake up if the stars align. Now, what do I make of all of this then? Well, honestly, it's equal parts exciting and perplexing, right? It's exciting because if Sui does become the next big thing, then we might look back and say the clues were there. A NASDAQ company was loading up for months, and we all just shrugged it off. It's kind of like a plot twist in hindsight, right? But it is also perplexing because, hey, what if Sui flops or just never kind of lives up to all of its hype? Then Sui Group's stash could turn into a giant bag of disappointment. They would have a big vault of tokens not worth nearly what they had hoped. It would be the first time a bold crypto bet went south. So for me personally, I'm not rushing to replicate their strategy, but I'm definitely not going to, I am definitely going to be keeping a closer eye on Sui from now on, right? I hold some after all, right? I've moved, from my kind of interesting to let's see what happens list, at least on my kind of potentially significant list anyway. Now, I might even scoop up some more Sui for myself just to make sure that, I'm well covered for the ride, get some more skin in the game to make sure that following the story is a little bit more fun. And if I do, I'll probably use an exchange like BitGet. Now, I've got an affiliate link in the description down below if you want to check it out. It doesn't cost you anything extra, and it does help support the channel here. But remember, that's just me and my risk appetite. You've got to do what is right for you. The bigger lesson here isn't go buy Sui because some company did. It's actually more about seeing how the crypto landscape is evolving, right? We've got public companies acting like crypto whales, crypto networks trying to become the next big platform, and traditional finance and DeFi blending in kind of odd ways. It's a wild time to be kind of following all of this stuff, and honestly, I kind of love it. It's like being on the ground floor of a new mystery every single week. In the end, my little investigative adventure kind of taught me something simple, right? If you see smoke in crypto, there's often a fire. A weird rumor led me to uncover a pretty big deal in the Sui world. Maybe it pans out, maybe it fizzles, but it definitely wasn't nothing. And hey, it made one heck of a story that I could share with all of you guys. So, next time that you hear some crazy sounding crypto rumor, don't just dismiss it. Do a little digging. You might stumble upon a hidden treasure or at least a great story. As for Sui and our whale in the stock market's clothing, well, I'll be watching closely. Who knows? Maybe this is the start of something huge. Or maybe I'll be here a year from now saying, remember that company that tried to become a Sui whale? Well, what were they thinking? Either way, it won't be boring, and that is for sure. So all right, that's the adventure that I've got for you. If you've enjoyed it coming along on this little adventure with me, then you know what to do. Subscribe for more, and I'll catch you in the next one.